Psalm 118. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, v'chanuchem mi beit Adonai. Blessed is those who come in the name of God. We bless you, the house of Adonai, our God. How blessed we are to come together across lines of faith as members of the greater Westfield community. A special welcome to two of our newest clergy in Westfield, Rabbi Victor Appel of Temple Emanu-El and Reverend Alice Phillip of First United Methodist Church. I know our community is thrilled to have the opportunity to learn and pray with you, and us as well. For centuries, people of faith have turned to the biblical book of Psalms for solace, guidance, catharsis, and renewal. The 150 Psalms that constitute this important component of the writing section of the Hebrew Bible of the Old Testament reflect a wide range of experience and expression, anger and acceptance, complaint and comfort, despair and delight, fatigue and faith. For me, those have been all the feelings I've been holding these past 4 months as our community grapples with COVID-19, as well as difficult conversations about race in our own community and across America. I've turned to the Psalms for guidance, to strengthen my faith, to challenge my thinking. In approaching the Psalms, many have found these ancient words work for them to help uncover their own words and reflect on the current situation we're facing. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, a charismatic religious leader in the 18th and 19th century, believed that the Psalms were critical to repair the world and viewed them as a dialogue between human and the Creator. Prayer accomplishes a unique reunion, a special convergence of people and God, of people and people, of people and the universe. Even though some of the Psalms may seem alien, when one digs deep enough, one may find a wellspring of great impact. The Westfield Clergy Association wanted to offer a space of reflection for our community during this time. We felt that studying the Psalms would be a way for us to gather and turn to our faith to provide us guidance. Each member of the clergy will share a psalm this afternoon. If you have reflections as you listen to different voices, we invite you to share your thoughts in the chat box. We'll have an opportunity to learn. We'll also have the opportunity to listen to some of those psalms as well. Father Randazzo.
Thank you, Rabbi Ethan. Welcome everyone to this wonderful moment where we are sharing together as the Westfield clergy on the breath of the Psalms. I've chosen Psalm 91. The reason for this was an email from a dear friend from Ireland whose brother had a stroke, and she asked me on behalf of her brother, who said to her, please ask your friend, the priest, to pray Psalm 91 for me. Thus, Psalm 91 is the psalm upon the screen. The psalm is one absolutely for our times. In fact, it's also a psalm that often it gets overlooked in the Catholic community, but is chosen for our funeral liturgies. One of the most popular songs that people choose at that very sad and grieving moment is On Eagle's Wings. That song is based on Psalm 91. This past week on July 11th in the Catholic community, we celebrated the father of Western monasticism, Saint Benedict. Benedictine communities, monastic communities, pray the psalmody, the 150 psalms through the day. The psalms punctuate all the hours of the day, the sacred hours of prayer. What is at stake in Psalm 91? Two primary themes. The first one is trust. You see in the first paragraph, my refuge, my fortress, my God in whom I trust. What is trust? What is the kind of trust that the psalm initiates into the praying heart? It's an absolute sense of confidence in God. In order to have that confidence, sisters and brothers, we have been drawn into a relationship with God. We are not outside of relationship. We are inside of an intimate relationship with God. And thus, our trust is broad and deep. And this psalm, as a royal psalm, as a psalm that is given to us to reassert that we do trust in God. The word trust itself in translation is found over 50 times in the 150 Psalms. In collaboration with that theme of trust in Psalm 91 is protection. When you go through this psalm, you feel protected. This is a psalm of protection, that this God who you trust in is not a God who is in disguise or a God who is away from us, but a God who is like a fortress protecting us. We wear a mask these days to protect the other and to protect oneself. This is a psalm to encourage us to wear our mask as a symbol of God's protection. Very much in line with Psalm 91. Yes, dear sisters and brothers, this is the kind of psalm that has great relevancy for our times. It's a personal psalm for anyone to pray in the quiet of the night or having a cup of coffee in the morning at the beginning of the day. It's a communal psalm for people to come together and to sing the psalm, a song of praise, understanding that they trust not only in God, but they trust that others are praying to a trustworthy experience of God. Yes, and in conclusion, sisters and brothers, this psalm is a psalm for COVID times par excellence. I quote a doctor, a healthcare worker, who, as a martyr of compassion, when he was told by his family, you can really sit this one out, you've done enough. He said, no, it's in God's hands. Everywhere, everyone, everything is in God's protective hands. May Psalm 91 help us to trust in God. Thank you.
Reverend Allison Phillip.
Thanks for that music, Ethan. That version of the song that we heard is a Celtic style of Psalm 27. And I am drawn to that music and to the words of the song. There's another Celtic Christian community in England I'm familiar with in Northumbria. And each morning they pray together, and their morning liturgy includes words from this psalm. They say together, "One thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek, to dwell in the house of the Lord and to behold the beauty of the Lord." And I just love that that's something that they say each day. I imagine those words serve as a reminder to the people reading them each morning to anchor themselves in their desire for God and their seeking for God in the midst of the other desires and false gods that might creep in or want to distract us from our seeking. I think over the years, in many traditions, Psalm 27 expresses this human longing that we share for the ultimate, for God, for light and love that transcends in the midst of all the human things that we face. At different points in the psalm, the writer talks about seeking God's light in the midst of fear. He seeks God's face, which also means God's presence, in the midst of distraction or in the midst of things that threaten his livelihood. And so when I read the words, it feels like an invitation for me to do the same thing, for me to seek God and God's love and God's light in the midst of the dangers and the struggles that are around us in our time and place. But the other thing that strikes me in talking about this psalm and its theme of seeking God, and the thing that comforts me as I consider it, is that religion isn't only about us seeking God. The psalm captures some of what that movement of us to God looks like. But I was struck by something that the Sufi poet Rumi said, which is a good reminder of the way that other traditions can speak into our own and teach us something. One thing that I heard this week that anchored me as well is what Rumi says, what you seek is seeking you. What you seek is seeking you. And so not only is it that we as people are seeking God, but across our traditions, we have the shared sense that the God we seek is also seeking us. And I find comfort in that when my own seeking is not, when I get distracted or when it's not enough or when I can't do it myself, God's also seeking me and just as earnestly. And that gives me a great sense of hope and faith in the midst of what we're living through. Gives me a sense of the kind of courage that the psalm ends with. The psalm moves from like the psalmist, the writer's seeking God, and in the end it talks about waiting for God and finding courage. And I get a sense of that courage knowing that it's not just a one-way seeking, but it's a two-way seeking, that God is looking for me to, that there's goodness in the land of the living, that God is constantly glimmering, giving me little glimmers of that goodness, inviting me to see it and to relish it and to take courage in it, knowing that God's close. And so, in this psalm, I see an invitation to pay attention to those little glimmers of light that God gives us in a million different ways, even in the midst of hardship, and an invitation to soak up that goodness as a source of courage along our journey. It's good to start to get to know you all. Thanks for having me.
You. Reverend Duncan Johnston.
Wonderful. Thank you for listening to that. I thought you might find it pleasant to have a little snatch of St. Paul's Cathedral in London as an example of how we in the Episcopal tradition, the Anglican tradition, traditionally use psalms in worship. So I hope you enjoyed that. 37 is a song of abundance. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. In many Christian traditions, this psalm is read in early October, the time in the Northern Hemisphere of harvest, the time of abundance, golden days of reaping God's rich gifts. It is a joyful call to God's people to have a hopeful perspective. We don't have to, of course. We can, as the poet states at the beginning, focus on what's wrong, especially on the people who do wrong. And in doing so, we can become bent out of shape, twisted with anger and envy. But here is the word of the Lord. When the abundance of God meets the emptiness of the human soul, beauty happens. When the abundance of God meets the emptiness of the human soul, peace happens. Take it from a world-class warrior. If you want to lose sleep, raise blood pressure, and stifle joy, I recommend that you believe in a small God with limited resources. If you see God as a bank manager, cautiously guarding his fortune in case it runs out, and needing to have his arm twisted before he'll release any of it, then we would be right to fret. We'd be wise to worry about what will happen to us in this complex world. If our hearts are focused on what we lack instead of what we have, then we will most certainly be anxious. There's only so much money to go around, only so much happiness, only so much love, only so much God. If other people are enjoying these, then there's less available to me. If there's not enough of God's blessing to go around, then we would be right to compete for God's love, to fight for material things, to hoard what we have, to be defensive, to be suspicious of other people, to reject the outsider, to close ranks and close borders, to fear the other, to shun risk, to settle for what we have and dedicate our energy to making sure no one else shares in it. What small minds, minuscule hearts, deformed and suffering spirits we endure when we focus on what we lack instead of celebrating what we have. The small thinker, the person focused on safety, the one content with scarcity, digs a hole in the ground and hides God's resources, their hearts, their words, their wisdom, their friendship, their joy, and the world suffers for it. They withhold the gift of encouragement because they fear they will be rejected. They keep to themselves the wise or comforting word, scared of saying the wrong thing. They hold their personalities under lock and key, anxious that they are unsightly. But when the abundance of God meets the emptiness of the human soul, beauty happens. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Amen.
Thank you. Rabbi Victor Appel.
Thank you, Ethan. So it's very good to be with all of you and to meet so many of you for the first time. I was told I only had 2 to 3 minutes, so I picked a short psalm. But seriously, Psalm 13 is what I would consider a back pocket psalm. It is obviously it's very short and it's easy to get through, and it gets to the point. If you will, it gets the job done. This short psalm, like many psalms, has a structure. And don't be fooled. Even this very short 6-verse psalm has a structure. And believe it or not, we can see that by dividing this very short psalm into 3 stanzas, the first being verses 2 and 3. When we look at these words, we see a bitter complaint from the writer about this terrible situation they find themselves in. The writer is clearly not happy in their relationship with God, who seems to be hidden. In verse 3, we get a sense of the turbulent emotional state of the writer, something we can probably all relate to. The petitioner sees no justification for this condition and asks not once, but over 2 verses, 4 times, how long will this situation last? Expressing fear about the unknown. It seems as if there is no end in sight. And finally, at the end of verse 3, we find out what the trouble is. The enemy has the upper hand. When we look at verses 4 and 5, we turn to supplication to God that this awful situation requires a remedy. It is essentially a prayer for a change in this situation. The writer asks, almost demands, that God see them, answer them, and restore the light to their eyes. Even though this stanza ends on a fearful note, the petition for a remedy is an act of hope itself. And in verse 6, we offer praise for the salvation that we have been given. The atmosphere of distress that has characterized the prior stanzas has changed dramatically. The psalmist expresses trust and joy, singing to God in faithfulness. The psalmist, in short order, goes from complaint to supplication to praise. What a great model for us. And I think that this short psalm may capture our own feelings, especially the haunting demand to know how long. It speaks to the fear of not knowing and the emotional price we have all paid. There may be more, however, to the last verse than simply meets the eye. Walter Brueggemann, the biblical scholar and theologian, writes of the Psalms, it is the function of these songs to enable, require, and legitimate the complete rejection of the old and safe circumstance. That old arrangement is seen, if not as fraud, at least as inadequate to the new circumstance. It seems to me that this psalmist, the author of Psalm 13, knows that we cannot go back, but only forward. A new reality requires a new hope and a new faith. Ever the realist, but always hopeful, the writer of Psalm 13 has complete faith in our and in God's ability to rise to the occasion. Thank you.
Reverend Jeremy Jenkins.
In setting things up, one of the things I'd like to do is we'll have some music in just a moment. But before we do, the setup is that my psalm, Psalm 88, in my tradition is actually one of the least known, least understood, least used in worship. And I hope that you'll get a sense for it as the music plays in just a moment. This is from the David Asaph project. That's ASAPH. It can be found on YouTube. There are very few good recordings of this psalm. And so I'll ask that we start with it. We don't even have to play the entire thing, but then bring up Psalm 88 on the screen for us to be able to read as we start. So we'll go ahead and start.
On my salvation, I have cried day and night before thee. Let my prayer come before thee, incline thine ear unto my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draweth nigh to the grave. I am counted with them who go down into the pit. I am as a man that hath no strength. Free among the dead, like the slain, the light in the grave. Now remembrance no more. And they cut off from my hand, thou hast laid me in lowest pit, in darkness, in the deeps, my wrath lieth hard upon me. Day and
So friends, I think what you could catch out of that song, and I encourage anybody who can resonate with the words of that, Psalm 88 is, and this is a very technical term, it is a bummer. That's the only way to describe it. From beginning to end, what makes this psalm stand out is it is a psalm of lament like none of the other psalms of lament. What I really appreciated about what Victor gave us in his own study of 13 is you have somebody who is bringing, complaint, but also and his supplications, but also trust and praise. And as many of the colleagues have been able to point out today and showing us, the Psalms give us so much space within these 150 songs for the full range of human emotion and experience. And what makes this psalm special is that it gives us space. There are a lot of psalms of lament, but Psalm 88 is a space for us to enter into where we do not have to jump to the happy conclusion. We do not have to look to the horizon to where things might be resolved for us. I really appreciated when Victor mentioned Walter Brueggemann, the theologian. The place where he was quoting from is part of a larger book by Brueggemann on the idea that the Psalms start and give us a pattern for life of being oriented to something, and then disorientation comes along, and then we are reoriented. And Psalm 88, instead of giving a full Bible study of it, I think what I'd like to do is start at the very beginning, go to the very end, and then invite people into a place where if you're resonating with the words that are going on, to have your own, not even Bible study, but just a reflection or some sort of devotional time on your own with the song that I gave earlier. And so I'll keep this short. But at the very beginning, the thing that we have is, O Lord God of my salvation, when at night I cry out in your presence. The closest thing that we have to trust in God for the entire psalm is that this person who is crying out and feeling pushed aside, feeling as though there is nothing left in their life but suffering, still understands that they are within the life of God. And at the very end, we have this phrase, but I, O Lord, cry out to you in the morning, my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast me off? Like I said at the beginning, this psalm gives us space. It's the only psalm, in fact, in the Psalter that gives us the space and the room to be able to begin and end, not ready yet, to look for the resolution. We have time to simply feel where we are in the moment. And I know that not everybody is going to be able to see themselves within the words of this psalm, but for those of you who are really suffering in this time, the gift of Psalm 88 is that we don't have to jump to hope and before we're ready. We can honor the feelings that we have, and we are reminded that that we're not alone when we feel this way, that others have walked this journey. They have penned these words as a testament that other humans have felt this way, and that God has been with them even then. This psalm of space gives us room to trust that we are crying out in the presence of God, even when we cannot feel that there is a next step to be taken. Again, I ask and invite that anybody who feels resonance with this, that after we're done, go and spend some time with it, dwell, and give yourself the patience and even the permission to not have to have the answers yet. Thank you.
Reverend Joy Mounts.
So I apparently didn't get the memo about a short psalm. Good morning, everyone. Psalm 139 is a psalm that is very personal to me, which is why I chose it. It wasn't always my favorite psalm, I have to be honest, but I sort of came to it through the back door. I think a lot of times we do this. I heard this originally as a song by contemporary Christian artist Michael Card on his album, The Ancient Faith. The song is called Search Me and Know Me, and we're going to play a piece of it afterwards at the end of my talk. But when I heard that song, it moved me greatly. And then I found out he'd taken all the words directly from Psalm 139. So that sent me to the psalm to then read the rest of the psalm and to marvel again at an ancient psalm that wrestles with the questions that we wrestle with every day, about how is God in our lives. This psalm is about the relationship between the psalmist, between us all and God, and that God knows us. And that this psalm is interesting because it has a big break. The beginning of it from 1 to 18 is sort of one thought, and then 19 to 24, there's this like break, but then the question at the end, lead me in the way everlasting, search and know me, is the same question in the beginning, the same praise, you search and you know me. So even though there's this break, they're not two separate psalms, it's one psalm put together. But this whole idea of how God knows us. God is not abstract here. This is not a God who's somewhere floating on a cloud that is passive. This is a God that's in relationship. This is a God that knows us from the beginning, knows us from even before we existed. And that humans, as biblical scholar James May has written, humans are enclosed in divine reality. So that God is everywhere, that this idea that we can't go anywhere that God is not. And this idea has gotten me personally through cancer, through job transitions, through lots of things in my life that I can grab onto that. And when we were thinking about teaching Psalms during this time of pandemic, I thought one of the things that I really love about this Psalm is the idea that two things, that God knows us so deeply that more deeply than we can know ourselves. And yes, that can be intimidating, that can be scary, like, whoa, I don't know if I want to be known that well, but also it's uplifting, right? God knows us and knows what we're capable of and can give us courage that we didn't even know we had to face things that we didn't even know we were going to have to face. So that is uplifting. God loves us. We're not captive, we're not prisoner, we're known. So within that, we have a freedom to know God and to be known by God. But the other thing is that the whole thing about if I'm here or if I'm on the side of the sea, you're there. If it's dark is like light to me because nothing hides you from me. This idea that even in the midst of this pandemic, when we can't go anywhere, when we're not traveling, that God is with us. God is with us in the middle of this, and all of our space in a world that, let's face it, seems more and more out of control. There is this that we can hold on to, that God is with us. That's such a huge comfort to us, that God is with us in all of these places. So again, God is here, God is active, God is not passive, God is with us, God knows us. And I think the psalmist is reassuring himself, but also reassuring us as we read this all these centuries later, that God is with us no matter what and knows us more deeply, as I said, than we could possibly ever know ourselves. And, you know, when we're trying to figure our lives out, knowing that God is there to help us puzzle it out and deal with it and deal with things is truly amazing and such a comfort. And so I hope that you will read all of this, because I'm not going to read it to you, but I would urge you to go and actually I would urge you to go back and read all the Psalms that were taught today, and read them again and sort of see where they sit with you. What are the ones that resonate with your heart? What are the ones that, you know, are your, are the ones that fill you up, that give you courage and comfort you, and just all of that. So I think, Ethan, do you want me to, you're going to play the song now? Okay. And then I'll say the other thing. Okay.
Oh my Lord, you search and you know me. You know when I sleep, you know when I rise. You know what I think, you know where I'm going. Nothing, oh Lord, can hide from your eyes. You lose me behind and before me. You me with your mighty hand. Such promises. Wonderful for me, too much for me to understand. Where can I go? Away from your spirit and from your presence. Where can I hide? Behold, up in heaven, you're there beside me. In the depths of the darkness, you're by my side. And if I rise on the wings of the morning, or settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, for your right hand is holding me. If I say darkness will hide me, the night will shine as bright as day. Search me, Lord, and lovingly lead me in your everlasting way.
I was very good. I did not sing along, so there you go. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this. Thank you to Temple Emanu-El for hosting us, and thank you to all of my clergy colleagues. This has been a fantastic session, and we really hope to do more of these. Thank you to all of you who joined us. It was great to see all of your faces, and I wish we had more to be able to be a little more interactive, but thank you so much. And just enjoy the rest of this day, and I hope that these songs of the Psalms will fill your hearts and help you the way that they've helped all of us. So have a great day. Thank you, guys.